I already know the audio is gonna stink on this. I'm going, libertarian speeds on the highway right now through New Hampshire, let's just say. And it's raining out. But I was just listening to a podcast where two comedians were talking about rape jokes and how sometimes somebody from the crowd will come up to them and say, "Oh, you think rape is funny?" And I listen to so much really aggressive, I guess what people would call dark comedy, and I think that people, the reason I had that on the mind is because they brought up tranny and how tranny is associated with porn. So when somebody says the word tranny, transgenders get upset because it reminds them of dark porn, and then it associates somebody that's transgender with the dark elements of that. But what's interesting to me are as far as comedy, as far as blue comedy goes, dark comedy goes, it's very ironic comedy is very intelligent comedy for the most part, and it's got multiple levels to it. And I think most people think that it's placating to the least common denominator, meaning like a redneck who is racist thinks it's funny. But that's not what it is. So when people with a PC culture agenda are attacking comedians for having dark comedy, it shows to me that that person hasn't evolved. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If somebody tells a joke making fun of a particular gender or race or intelligence or a dark thing like abortion or rape or stillbirth or anything that happens, and they're making a joke about that, in order for you to understand the full joke and in order for it to be funny, you have to go through a few stages. One, you have to understand that particular thing is off limits, and it's not about being edgy, but you have to understand that particular thing is off limits. So for instance, in quote unquote, for lack of a better term, but I'll say PC culture, but they call it woke culture or whatever, people are going around telling people like, you can't say this word, you can't say that word, you can't say this word. And it's like, okay, I get it, but you're way behind. Like, people already understand not to hurt people's feelings by directly saying that to them. And most people aren't doing that, right? So when they say, well, if you tell that black joke or that transgender joke or that tranny joke, you're hurting the feelings of a black person or a transgender person. It's like you're making an assumption that all black people or all transgender people don't have a sense of humor. So you're still living in the past. We've already moved forward. We've already recognized that there's these things in the world. We've come to grips with them, and we've come to grips with them we're so comfortable, we move so far past them, and they're so far in the rearview mirror that they're funny to us. So when I'm hanging out with one of my female friends, and like, I don't even know, like, she stubs her toe when we're at the grocery store or whatever, and I say, oh, well, hey, maybe you shouldn't have been out of the kitchen. We laugh because it's so ridiculous, because it's so far in the rearview mirror. Like, obviously I don't believe she should be in the kitchen. Obviously she knows I know that she shouldn't be in the kitchen. We both know the origin of the time when people thought that women should only be in the kitchen. But the funny part is, had she been in the kitchen, she wouldn't have stubbed her toe. but some people here, oh well, if you're not out of the kitchen, and they haven't put it behind them. They're still growing. So they're policing it like it's a new thing. Like, you can't say that. It's like, yeah, you haven't been able to say that for 4 decades now. So, like, move forward, move on. And I think this is the biggest thing that's just hilarious to me about, it's like any government program. So this is a government program of political correctness that's like trying to wave through society. But the topics that they're picking and pushing and discussing and trying to be PC on, most people that are joking about it have already been like, yes, no crap. And they're like, well, I went to college and I made a black friend, and you're really not supposed to call them Negroes. And it's like, yeah, no shit. I've been joking around about the word Negro with my black friends for 30 years. Like, the fact that you're just figuring out this now says more about you than me. Me and my friends of any color, race, gender, whatever, are already in the point where we're joking about this. If you're especially, I don't want to turn this into like generational, like whatever, because I know millennials that have good sense of humor, or boomers. I know Gen Zs, Zoomers, all of them. But as a Gen Xer, like, we grew up in a time where not only did we like leave our house and like drink from the garden hose and run around the neighborhood and stuff, but then we came home and we watched The Cosby Show, A Different World, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Sanford and Son on reruns, Living Single, A Different World. Like, we In Living Color was like this amazing like comedy show that had like all colors on it of people. It was mostly a black cast, and they made black jokes, and Mad TV was similar to that. And it was like, oh, we already passed all this. But SNL, which was the legacy one, didn't really care for this, and they're the ones that are still behind. Like, SNL is only there because it's being propped up by a corporation that doesn't pay any taxes, that's part of this oligarch, and that pushed out these other sketch shows. But if you look at the most popular sketch shows, look at the sketch shows like Dave Chappelle, Key and Peele, Mad TV, In Living Color, Kids in the Hall, Whitest Kids We Know. The reason these shows are so funny, or even Mighty Python back in the 60s, 70s, making fun of transgenderism and wokeness, 50 years ahead of time. It's like they got comedy because they already processed and moved forward. So this is like comedy for people that already understand the layers of this and that just want to have a good time. And then the people that are just coming out of this dark age are like pointing fingers at you saying, oh, don't say that, it's offensive. And it's like, no, it was offensive 50 years ago, but it's so far in the rearview mirror, it's not offensive anymore. It's like it's always too soon for them, but they haven't even moved up to seeing people as equals yet. They're like, oh, you can't joke around black people, and it's like, why? Like, because they see black people as super sensitive without a sense of humor. You can't make fun of people that are androgynous or have transgender or are part of the LGBT community. Like, have you never seen one of them do stand-up or tell jokes? And then they get their like Nanette, whatever, and it does poorly, and they all go watch it to try to support it, and it does poorly, and they're like, well, comedy doesn't have to be funny. And they're like, no, it doesn't have to be funny. Go ahead. And they're like, whoa, you guys are mad that this... No, go have your special. We don't want to watch it. We want to watch this stuff. But you're kind of doing, like... You're kind of doing George Carlin type material 50 years too late. That's why no one finds it funny. Like, she's in that storyline, she's talking about all this stuff that she went through, and it's like, yeah, we've already, like, that's in the past. I'm sorry. Like, there's new frontiers of issues going on. So the reason it's not funny is because you didn't even address it until it was already over. So then it's like somebody trying to do like a Richard Pryor stand-up today. When you go back and you watch Eddie Murphy or you watch Richard Pryor, and people try to dissect that humor, and they're like, oh, it's not funny, and it's mean, and it's like, but at the time, the reason it was funny because that stuff had just been put in the rearview mirror, and people just started understanding. It wasn't because they were insensitive to these people at the time. It was because people were just starting to understand, and by telling those stories, they were remembering back how stupid it was when people thought those things. So when a comedian is telling these in-person stories, it's after the fact, but it has to be on the edge of what's actually going on. So the reason a lot of these comedians are getting so popular is because people that want to change, or young people that have already moved on, the next generation that have already moved on, that are kind of going full circle back to kind of like what Gen Z mindset was before all this stuff was politicized, kind of, I guess, whenever 2008-ish, I guess it started, maybe 2005-ish. This stuff started getting politicized. People are going back, and so now the youngest people get that it's funny because it's like, it's so stupid that there's still people like just causing this victimhood and fighting for these things that don't even exist, and causing problems that people already don't care about. And like, think about it, like, corporations are bending over backwards. People are taking down the American flag. They're putting up rainbow colored flags in their yard. They're putting up non-binary flags now. M&Ms have to change their color and flip themselves upside down for the status quo. And then those people are going out saying, we're oppressed, we're the new slaves. And you're just like, if you're sitting next to your black grandmother, the two of you have to laugh. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like, this is insanity. Like, you've won. Go enjoy. And I mean, I guess there always has to be a group of unsatisfied customers in the mix. But the idea that something isn't funny because you're not over it yet, you still find it sensitive material because you haven't done the internal work to morally understand completely why that thing is incorrect and wrong, and then have that so far behind you that you're in front of it, that it's just funny to look back at a time when it was okay. Like, it is funny. It's funny to look back and think about this stuff when it was okay, because it's absurd. But if it's not far enough, like, you know, they have the thing like too soon. It's like sometimes, like, the next day is makes certain people laugh because they've already processed so far in the future. Like, if you, like, when Anthony Jeselnik made the Boston bombing joke on Twitter the next day, where it says, you know, I forget what it was, but it's like some lines are not meant to be crossed or whatever. It's, first of all, he already made the joke and the apology, saying, like, people of the Boston bombing, the next day they had family members that were hurt or whatever. The next day they had better things to do than be on Twitter, so they never saw the joke, so it wasn't for them. But some people want to deal with the trauma in that way by joking about it. But, like, everybody knows that bombings and death are bad and wrong. But if you've never taken the time to work on yourself and your mental faculties to the point where you've processed your own mortality, life and death, and the cruelty of the world, but also the fragility of the world, but also the morality and goodness of the world, and you haven't processed all that stuff and processed it so that it's behind you and you're moving forward living a healthy lifestyle, then yes, when you see that Boston bombing joke, it's going to offend you and it's going to trigger your animal instincts. But if you are an individual that is emotionally strong and kind of move forward from that, and you kind of like understand it from an intellectual, ironic point of view, it's because it's multifaceted. One, it's a funny joke, it's a pun, it's like the stupidest but funniest, but easiest, hackiest part of it. It's a pun. The line. Two, yes, there's an edginess to it, meaning he put it out knowing that he probably shouldn't have, and that not everybody's going to be able to process it properly. But then those two things together, the way he wrote it and the way that there was no fat on the joke, all work really well together for what he did. I wish he wouldn't never apologized and taken it down, but I guess he was, at the time he had a TV show and he was going to lose it, and there was multiple people on his show that would have lost his job, so he did it for them, not for the integrity of the joke or whatever. But it was sad to see. But like for instance, one of my other favorite jokes, there's literally no fat on it. Dave Attell has a joke, albino, too much of a good thing? And so just imagine, first of all, Dave Attell is old school comedian, New York comic. You might have seen him at like Comedy After Dark when he used to be on Comedy Central, but he's been doing comedy forever. He's a Jewish man, New York City, working forever. So by no fat in that joke, meaning he just says albino, comma. So like now your mind says, what's an albino? There's albino dogs, there's albino zebras, there's albino leopards, there's puppies, fish, humans, everything's albino. But he says albino, he knows that your mind is going to translate that into an albino person. You know what an albino person is. It's ultra white. Then he says, too much of a good thing? So then your mind has to then process, well, like, oh, wait, white? Too much of a good thing? Why would white be too much of a good thing? So now it's funny because it's like he's saying white's a good thing, but is an albino too much of a good thing? And there's a saying called too much of a good thing. And so it's a familiar back end of it. And there's so much reading in between the lines in this simple little joke. But also now imagine you're in a crowd of people you don't know, you're unfamiliar with, different cultural structures, you're shoulder to shoulder, there's a little nervousness, there's a little tension. He comes out and then he says, albino, too much of a good thing? And it's like, you cannot help but crack the ice in the room and laugh with all these strangers at such a simplistic joke with a colloquialism as the back end of it that he didn't even write, simply putting the pause and the comma in there between the word, and then your mind fills in all the spaces. Now if you get offended by that, I mean I don't understand. Like, I guess you could get offended by that because I guess he's saying, like, he's not saying that white is the good thing, but that's the joke. But there's a joke that white people think that that's the best thing. So he's pretending to be a supremacist in the way that white is good. But there's also a thing called albino, and he's like, too much of a good thing because people think being albino is bad. So now it's like, well, if being white is so good and that's the joke, then why does everybody, including white people, think albinos are gross and disgusting? And I'm sorry if I have any albino listeners, but that's the stereotype with that as well. And an albino person doesn't necessarily have to be Caucasoid. You could have, you could have an Asiatic albino, you could have a Negroid albino, Caucasoid albino, Aboriginal albino. And so it's just the absence of pigment. It has nothing to do with actual race. It has to do with skin color. And then if you're intelligent to understand that race and skin color are two different things, and skin color is an evolutionary thing based on equator proximity, it becomes an even deeper and stronger and funnier joke for people to enjoy. But the laughter happens instantaneously within that moment, in that short period, because your brain can process that all so quickly. I don't know. I wish people could just really enjoy comedy more. It seems like people, they get a kick out of being offended, and then once they turn on those pathways in their brain, they're open and ready to accept being offended. So they're just primed for it. They go out primed for it. So if you go out primed to laugh, you're going to go out and laugh. If you're primed to be angry, you're going to go out and be angry. And if you're primed to be offended, you're going to be primed to be offended. I remember when I was in a depression and I was using hot yoga to work my way out of the depression, I was having a philosophical talk with one of my teachers, and we were talking about how if you imagined your brain as a forest and you were walking down a path constantly, that you wore a path in the forest and it kept going to a dark place with brambles and stuff. And so you said, I can't go that way. I got to find a new way. So you come back and you start a new path, and it's going to be hard to cut the path and move through the forest. But you finally cut it, and then every day you go down this new path in the forest, which would be a similarity to the your brain path, the brain waves. But the old path still takes time for the foliage to grow back in. So those brain waves in your brain that are opened to being triggered, to being a victim, to feeling hurt, to feeling negative, maybe it's from childhood trauma, maybe it's from indoctrination, maybe it's from propaganda, whatever it is, they take a while to reopen. Maybe it's from medication that they're putting you on that's triggering this negativity. Once you can reopen your brainwaves, and a lot of people do this with shrooms and stuff. I think why they work so well for a lot of people is, I did mine all natural through meditation, exercise, and therapy and stuff. But it opens like all the pathways in your brain and just has an explosion, so that it kind of like clears the whole forest for you to walk through. And then you can pick the happy ones to walk through, and then the foliage grows back over the paths that you don't want to go down to. And now you can go down new, happier paths of neurons firing within your brain on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. I guess the long and short of it is, most comics that I know, if you tell them they're unfunny, they get really upset. So they're going on stage to make you laugh, and they want to be funny. They're not going on stage to offend you or hurt you. They don't write a joke saying, I want to get somebody offended. They write a joke to be funny. And sometimes they're trying to make a particular part of the crowd laugh, or make you think about something in a different way that you never thought about it within the joke. And sometimes you have to do that in a very harsh manner so that it triggers the cognitive dissonance. Because if you had an emotional reaction to get to a place that you're in, the only way out of it is another emotional reaction. So if you use logic, reason, evidence to get somewhere, it would take logic, reason, evidence to get out. But if you emotionally put somewhere, you're not going to be the logic and reason your way out of an emotional box. You have to get an emotional charge out of that to reevaluate stuff. But anyways, these comics are trying to make people laugh. They're not trying to be edgy. They're not trying to hurt people. There is speakers, I would say, that kind of get a kick out of it. I don't understand. There's a couple people on the left and a couple people on the right. People that I can think of is like Charlie Kirk on the right, Charlie Kirk, even Shapiro. It's like this whole like conservative destroys lefty, or lefty obliterates righty in argument. And they don't. It's just like snarkiness. And they're like, my facts don't care about feelings. It's like, but it's really is not about facts. It's about like one little liner and the crowd goes crazy. And then that speaker's getting a dopamine hit. So it really is about their feelings. And they claim that it's not, because they wouldn't be trying to be snarky in that manner to get a crowd reaction that gives them a dopamine and serotonin rush from the cheer if it wasn't about their feelings. They would genuinely let the crowd boo them and try to reach the person that they're speaking to and say, okay, why do you feel that way? And have a discourse. I know they can't do that for the soundbite, but they're not trying to be funny. They're trying to hurt feelings, and they're trying to get their feelings charged by this positive energy. Whereas the comedians are going out trying to get a laugh, which is an involuntary response to something that's funny. It's a magical moment for them. But anyways, all right, I'm home. So good talk. Hopefully I'll upload these things. I really think I need to start recording, put together a studio. I have a camera. And really, let me know if I post this in the comments below, if you think this is something that you're getting value from, or is there other people already talking about this? I don't feel like there's other people that are having discussions and speaking and explaining things in the way that I'm explaining things. Maybe I'm conceited. Maybe this is something that everybody already kind of understands. Or maybe this is something that is going to be eye-opening for people. And if it is, I really want to shift my business from what I'm doing right now to getting on a platform where I can speak to a lot of people and help a lot of people having conversations like this, where instead of keeping this to myself, sharing this with people that can have a different perspective and go through some of these and maybe just help us get back together as individuals. I don't really give two shits about a country or anything like that, but just as people on a day-to-day basis, for us to have more understanding with one another. So, all right. Peace.